नमस्कार दोस्तों, माई सेल्फ अथर्वा मेडकरी ऑल्सो नाउन एज वेंकटेश। आप सभी लोगों का कृष्णाई प्री मेडिकल एंड मेडिकल एकेडमी इस एजुकेशनल यूट्यूब चैनल में स्वागत है।
Food is one of the basic requirements of all living organisms. The major components of our food are carbohydrate, proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals. They are unable to body to perform functions such as respiration, excretion, and so on. Our body is incapable of using certain biomacromolecules such as carbohydrate and protein in their original form. Digestive system to break down food and convert to biomacromolecule into smaller, simple and absorbable molecules. Our digestive system comprises the alimentary canal of gastrointestinal tract and digestive glands. The alimentary canal, the long pathway through which food enters the body and solid waste are ejected, include organs such as mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine and large intestine, and anus. If we absorb the structure of alimentary canal, we will see that mouth, the anterior opening of the alimentary canal, leads to the oral cavity or buccal cavity, which contain teeth and tongue. Each teeth in the cavity is embedded in socket of the jawbone, forming a type of attachment known as thecodont. The hard, chewing surface of the tooth made up of enamel help in chewing and breaking down of food. Interestingly, human beings develop two sets of teeth during their lifetime, and it is known as diphyodont. The permanent teeth in adults are of four types. Incisors are represented by I, canine are represented by C, premolar are represented by PM, and molar are represented by M. Arrangement of teeth in each half of the upper and lower jaw in order I, C, PM, and M is represented by a dental formula which in human is 21-23 by 21-23. The tongue, the second member of oral cavity. It is freely movable muscular organ attached to the floor of the oral cavity by the frenulum. The upper surface of tongue is covered with papillae. The small projections arranged a row, some of which bear a taste buds. The tongue helps push food from the oral cavity to pharynx. The passageway for air and food, the pharynx open into the windpipe or trachea and esophagus, a narrow tubular muscular organ. When food moves through pharynx and approaches the esophageal entrance, a flap of elastic cartilage tissue called epiglottis reflexively closes, thereby preventing the food from the windpipe. The esophagus conducts the food from pharynx to stomach, and end of the esophagus lies the gastroesophageal sphincter, one way of wall that allows the food to enter the stomach. The stomach, a J-shaped sac, is located in the upper left part of the abdominal cavity between the esophagus and first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. Gastric acid inside the stomach digests the food we eat. The stomach is made up of three major parts: a fundic region, a cardiac portion, and pyloric portion. And end of the pyloric portion lies the pyloric sphincter, which regulates the flow of churned food from stomach into duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. The duodenum is followed by the jejunum and ileum that make the small intestine. While the duodenum is a short, C-shaped portion, the jejunum is a long coiled portion. The ileum is other hand is a highly coiled region that open into the large intestine. The large intestine, which second last part of the alimentary canal, is divided in three regions, namely cecum, colon and rectum. The cecum, a small blind sac which hosts some symbiotic microorganisms, is not as developed in human as in ruminant. All over in humans, the cecum give rise to narrow finger-like tubular projection called the vermiform appendix, which is vestigial or functionless organ. The cecum open into the colon, which is divided in ascending transverse and descending colon. The descending part of the colon leads to the rectum, a bag-like structure which stores undigested food as a fecal matter till it can be passed out. The rectum leads to the last member of alimentary canal. The anus, which ejects the undigested food, remains. The wall of the anus as well as the other organs of the alimentary canal is made up of 4 layers of tissues, namely the serosa, muscularis, submucosa and mucosa. The serosa, the outermost layer, is made up of thin mesothelium along with some connective tissues. The serosa is followed by the muscularis, the muscle layer made up of circular inner layer and longitudinal outer layer of smooth muscle cells. Adjoining the muscularis is a submucosa, which is soft connective tissue layer containing blood vessels, nerve ending and lymphatic vessels. In the duodenum, glands are also present in submucosa. Finally, mucosa, the innermost layer of the alimentary canal, lies the lumen of the alimentary canal. It is an important layer as the mucosal epithelium has goblet cells which help in lubrication by secreting mucus. In the stomach, mucosa forms gastric glands and irregular fold rugae, whereas in a small intestine, mucosa forms villi, small finger-like projections. The mucosa are also forms crypts, called the crypts of Lebercon, between the bases of villi. The borders of villi are brush-like appearance as the cells lining the villi produce several microscopic projections called microvilli. Both villi and microvilli considerably increase the absorptive surface area of the small intestine. Villi also have network of capillaries and large lymph vessels called lacteal. Interestingly, the tissues of alimentary canal wall shows modification by way of thickness and so on. Apart from alimentary canal, a digestive system also consists of salivary glands, liver, and pancreas, which are collectively known as the digestive glands. The salivary glands, located just outside the oral cavity, secrete salivary juices into the cavity. There are three pairs of salivary glands: the parotid gland, located in a cheek, and submandibular gland found in lower jaw, and sublingual gland located between the below the tongue. The liver is the largest gland in a body. It is located in abdominal cavity just below the diaphragm. It has two hepatic lobes, which are covered by thin connective tissue sheath called the Glison's capsule. The hepatic lobules are the structural and functional units of liver, containing hepatic cells arranged in the form of cords. The bile is secreted by the hepatic cells, passes through the hepatic duct, and stored and concentrated in the gallbladder. A duct emerging from the gallbladder along with hepatic duct from the liver forms the common bile duct, whose main function is to conduct the bile stored in the gallbladder into the duodenum. Apart from the liver, the digestive glands also include in pancreas, situated in a duodenum. The pancreas is compound and elongated organ consisting of exocrine and endocrine parts. While the exocrine portion secrete an alkaline pancreatic juice containing enzymes, the endocrine portion secrete hormones such as insulin and glucagon. The pancreatic duct, which carries the pancreatic juices from the exocrine portion, join the common bile duct, and both of them open into duodenum as a hepatopancreatic duct, which are guarded by the sphincter of Oddi. Together, organs of alimentary canal and associated glands digest the food we eat and digest the undigested food. Every day, our body performs several important functions such as respiration, digestion, and excretion. In this process, digestion is a vital one, as it provides to energy to body by converting complex food into smaller, simpler, and absorbable molecules. The digestion process begins the movement of food into the oral cavity through a mouth. The teeth present in an oral cavity masticate the food while tongue mixes with its saliva, which is rich in electrolytes such as sodium, potassium, chloride, and bicarbonate ions, and various enzymes such as salivary amylase and lysozyme. Each of the salivary component has its own function. The salivary amylase, a carbohydrate splitting enzyme, initiate the process of digestion in the oral cavity by hydrolyzing nearly 30% of food starch into a disaccharide or simple sugar called maltose. Whereas lysozyme acts as an antibacterial agent and kills microbes present in food substances, thereby preventing infections. Mucus, on the other hand, lubricate the food and helps the masticated food particles stick together to form a bolus. Thereafter, the bolus passes through the pharynx and then into the esophagus. By the process of swallowing or deglutition, one of the bolus enters the esophagus. A series of wave-like muscular contraction known as peristalsis pushes down the esophagus and towards the gastroesophageal sphincter, a one-way valve that conducts the bolus from the esophagus into the stomach. The bolus remains in the stomach for nearly 4 to 5 hours, where it mixes with the gastric juices secreted by the gastric glands. These glands are stimulated by gastrin hormone and inhibited by the enterogastrin hormone, and consist of three type cells: mucous neck cells which secrete mucus, the chief cells which secrete proenzyme, pepsinogen, and parietal cells which secrete hydrochloric acid, HCl, and intrinsic factor, a type of microprotein that absorbs vitamin B complex. A churning of stomach walls mixes these gastric gland secretion with the bolus, forms a bulb-like substances called chyme. During a process of churning, a highly concentrated hydrochloric acid secreted by the gastric glands convert the proenzyme pepsinogen present in the chyme into an active proteolytic enzyme called pepsin. Interestingly, the presence of hydrochloric acid in the lumen of stomach, the stomach mucosal epithelium remains relatively unscathed as a mucus and bicarbonate in the gastric juices lubricate. The chyme from the stomach passes through the pyloric sphincter and enters the duodenum. The first part of the duodenum. Here, movement generated by the muscularis layer of the duodenum causes the chyme to mix with pancreatic juice and bile. The secretion of hepatopancreatic gland. This secretion contains different enzymes and pigment that help in further breakdown of food molecule. Bile, for example, contain bile pigment such as bilirubin and biliverdin, bile salt, cholesterol, and phospholipids. On other hand, pancreatic juice consists of inactive enzymes such as trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase, amylase, lipase, and nucleases. These inactive enzymes are activated by trypsin and chymotrypsin, which are produced when enterokinase, an enzyme secreted by the intestinal mucosa, acts on inactive trypsinogen to form active trypsin and also convert inactive chymotrypsinogen into active chymotrypsin. The bile and pancreatic secretions now start converting complex molecule of the chyme into simpler forms. The proteolytic enzyme trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase act on the proteins, proteases, and peptones and convert them into smaller peptides. Similarly, the pancreatic amylase hydrolyze the carbohydrate into simple sugars or disaccharides. On the other hand, enzymes such as lipases break down fats into diglyceride and monoglyceride with the help of bile, whereas nucleases acts on nucleic acid and forms nucleic acids and nucleosides in the final step of digestion. The end product synthesized by action of bile and pancreatic juice are further converted into absorbable molecules by intestinal juice or succus entericus that's secreted by walls of the intestine. This juice consists of mucus secreted by goblet cells in small intestine, mucosal epithelium, and secretion of the brush border cells of the mucosa, and contains several enzymes such as disaccharidase, dipeptidase, lipases, and nucleosides. The simple substances produced in duodenum are absorbed in jejunum and ileum regions of small intestine. On other hand, the undigested and unabsorbed substances called faeces enter the cecum region of the large intestine through the ileocecal valve. The faeces then travel through the colon, which absorb water and minerals and certain drugs in the faeces. The colon also secretes mucus which adheres the undigested waste particles together and also lubricate them for easy passage. The fecal matter enter the rectum, they are temporary store. The proper coordination of different parts of the gastrointestinal tracts, its activity are under hormonal and neural control. Local hormones produced by the gastric and intestinal mucosa manage the secretion of digestive juices. On other hand, the sight, smell or presence of food in the oral cavity leads to the saliva secretion. Similarly, gastric and intestinal secretion such as pepsin and hydrochloric acid are also stimulated by neural signal. Neural mechanism can also moderate the muscular activities of different parts of the alimentary canal, both local and central nervous system. Thus, different parts of the alimentary canal and digestive glands help us to digest the food we eat. Absorption of food is an important event in digestion process. After complex food has been broken down into smaller components, it needs to be absorbed into the blood and lymph so that it can be transported throughout the body. Absorption takes place in different parts of the alimentary canal such as mouth, stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. Maximum absorption occurs in the small intestine. The villi on the intestinal wall increases the surface area of the small intestine and help to efficiently absorb the digestive nutrient such as glucose, fructose, amino acids, and electrolytes. These nutrients from the food pass through the intestinal mucosa into the bloodstream and are distributed throughout the body. Absorption takes place in the intestinal mucosa through passive transport and active transport. In passive transport, there is no expenditure of energy. There are three types of passive transport: simple diffusion, facilitated transport, and osmosis that assist in absorption. Small amounts of glucose, amino acids, and electrolytes such as chloride ions are generally absorbed from higher to lower medium by simple diffusion, whereas fructose and some amino acids are absorbed down a concentration gradient with help specific carrier protein through facilitated diffusion. On the other hand, transport of water takes place from a dilute concentrated solution medium through osmosis. The absorption also takes place from lower to higher medium through active transport. which is much quicker and require energy. Nutrients such as sodium ions, glucose, galactose, and amino acids are transported actively. Unlike carbohydrate and proteins, fats are not absorbed through the intestinal villi. Fatty acids and glycerol are insoluble in water and therefore cannot be absorbed by intestinal cells directly. They are first acted on bile salt to form small spherical droplet called micelles, which can easily move through intestinal mucosa. As the micelles enter the intestinal mucosa, they are coated with protein to form small fat lobules called chylomicrons, which are transported into the lymph vessel called lacteals in the villi. These lymph vessels ultimately release the absorbed substances into the bloodstream. Besides the small intestine, other parts of digestive system also play a role in the absorption process. For example, certain drugs are placed in mouth under the tongue so that they can be absorbed directly into the blood capillaries. The stomach wall directly absorbs certain foods including simple sugars and alcohol, and they do not remain in the stomach, while watersome minerals such as potassium and sodium and drugs are absorbed in large intestine. These absorbed nutrients are transported to different tissue of the body through blood vessels, and this process is called assimilation. The digestive waste passes through the large intestine, the water is absorbed and waste is solidified into feces. The fecal matter moves toward the rectum due to peristaltic veins in the walls of the colon, which finally eliminate the waste through the anus. If the digestive system does not function as smoothly as it should, it results in different types of disorders. Inflammation of intestinal tract takes place in their bacterial or viral infection. Parasitic infection are caused by tapeworm, roundworm, hookworm, and pinworms and others that usually infect the intestine. Indigestion takes place when food is not properly digested and one experiences the feeling of fullness, pain, or heartburn. This usually takes place due to inadequate enzyme secretion, anxiety, food poisoning, overeating, spicy food. Constipation is another condition of digestive system in which an individual has uncomfortable or infrequent bowel movement. Vomiting causes forceful contraction of the stomach and ejection of stomach contents through the mouth. This reflex action is controlled by the vomit center in medulla. Medical conditions such as jaundice result from excess of bilirubin or bile pigment in the tissue and body fluid. It affects the liver and causes the skin and eyes turn yellow due to the deposit of bile pigment. Diarrhea is another condition in which there is increased the liquidity of fecal discharge and bowel movement.